Welcome to Horror Year, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you're brave enough to face your darkest fears and uncover the most chilling tales, you've come to the right place. So, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and subscribe to Horror Year. Your journey into terror begins now. It was supposed to be a night of harmless fun. Just a group of friends playing with a Ouija board in an abandoned church they had discovered deep in the woods. The church, long forgotten by the world, was the perfect setting for a spooky night. The wooden pews were rotting, the stained glass windows were shattered, and the altar was covered in dust and cobwebs. The group gathered around the Ouija board, giggling nervously as they placed their fingers on the planchette. The first few minutes were uneventful, with the board spelling out random words that made no sense. But then, the planchette began to move with a force none of them could explain. "Who are we speaking to?" one of them asked. The planchette slowly spelled out, "SAVIOR. "Are you a good spirit?" another asked. "RUN, it replied. A chill ran through the group as the planchette jerked violently, spelling out DEATH over and over. The candles they had lit around them flickered wildly, and a cold wind swept through the church, extinguishing the flames. Panic set in, and they tried to end the session, but the planchette wouldn't stop moving. Suddenly, the church bell rang, even though there was no one else in the building. The sound was deafening, echoing through the hollow structure. The planchette moved on its own, spelling out GODFORSAKEN. At that moment, the doors to the church slammed shut, trapping them inside. The group ran for the doors, but they wouldn't budge. They were trapped, and the only thing they could do was watch in terror as the planchette spelled out a final message, LEAVENOW. As soon as the message was complete, the doors flew open, and they sprinted out of the church, not daring to look back. When they returned the next day, the Ouija board was gone, and the church was silent, as if it had never been disturbed. But the memory of that night and the chilling message they received still lingers with them, a reminder that some places should never be desecrated. The Midnight Skeptics had always been skeptical about the supernatural, so when their friends suggested playing with a Ouija board in an abandoned church on Halloween night, they laughed it off as a silly game. The church was known in the area for being haunted, a place where strange noises were often heard, and shadows seemed to move on their own. The group gathered around the altar, setting the board on a dusty old table. As soon as they began, the atmosphere in the church shifted. The air grew heavy and a sense of dread filled the room. Still, they pressed on, determined to make contact with whatever spirits might be lingering there. "Is there anyone here with us?" they asked. The planchette moved slowly at first, spelling out YES. "What is your name?" they asked. The response came quickly, NOTYOURS. The group exchanged uneasy glances but continued. They asked the spirit what it wanted, and the planchette spelled out LAUGHTER. As soon as the word was completed, a loud, sinister laugh echoed through the church. The group froze, looking around for the source, but there was no one there. The laughter grew louder, more maniacal, as shadows began to move across the walls, circling them. The candles they had brought flickered, casting eerie shapes on the walls, and the temperature in the room plummeted. One of the friends, who had been silent the entire time, suddenly stood up, their face pale and eyes wide with terror. "I saw it," they whispered. "A shadow. It's coming closer." The group panicked, desperately trying to end the session, but the planchette wouldn't stop moving. It spelled out RUN over and over again. The laughter became deafening and the shadows closed in, forming a dark, menacing figure that loomed over them. In a frenzy, they flipped the board over, breaking the session. The laughter ceased, and the shadows vanished, leaving them in silence. They fled the church, vowing never to return, but the sound of that sinister laugh still haunts them, echoing in their nightmares. Robert shared the story of a Ouija board session that went horribly wrong in an abandoned church known for its eerie silence. The church had been deserted for decades, its choir once famous for its beautiful hymns. But now, Only the wind whispered through its crumbling walls. It was a dare that brought them there, a challenge to see who would be brave enough to use a Ouija board in such a place. The group was confident, laughing as they set up the board in the center of the empty church. As soon as they placed their fingers on the planchette, the air grew thick with tension. "Who are we speaking to?" one of them asked. The planchette moved swiftly, spelling out S-I-N-G. "Do you want us to sing?" another asked, confused. "L-I-S-T-E-N, the board replied. Suddenly, the air filled with the sound of a choir singing. The voices were hauntingly beautiful, but there was something wrong, something off-key that sent chills down their spines. The group looked around, but the church was empty. The planchette continued to move, spelling out CHOIROFTHEDAMNED. As the message was spelled out, the singing grew louder, more discordant, until it was almost unbearable. The group covered their ears, but the sound seemed to come from within, reverberating in their very souls. Then, one of the group members began to sing along, their voice blending perfectly with the eerie choir. The others watched in horror as their friend's eyes glazed over, and their face twisted into a grotesque smile. The planchette moved on its own, spelling out SAVEME, but the message was too late. Their friend collapsed, the singing stopped, and the church fell silent once more. They tried to revive their friend, but it was as if their soul had been drained away, leaving behind only an empty shell. The group fled the church, leaving behind the Ouija board and their friend's lifeless body. To this day, the church remains abandoned, and no one dares to enter. The story of the damned choir is whispered among locals, a warning to anyone who might be tempted to play with forces beyond their understanding. The voices of the choir can still be heard on quiet nights, singing their haunting hymns, a reminder of the souls trapped within those walls. These stories are a stark reminder of the dangers of playing with the unknown. The Ouija board is not just a game, it's a doorway to forces we cannot control. If you ever find yourself tempted to use one, especially in a place as haunted as an abandoned church, remember these tales and think twice before you proceed. Some doors should never be opened, and some spirits are better left undisturbed.